Okay. I think this will be probably the more interesting part of the event or this activity session because I want to ask some more probing questions of our speakers. So let me start with you, Dr. Rajudure. Given the constraint of labor, basically that we really can't increase the number of people working, how do we increase the productivity of a worker?
Uh, Thank you, Mufadal. I have to insist that we need to change this age-old, unsuitable model which was suited for a colonial vintage. At that time, the manager had absolute control over the terms of conditions, and by necessity, the workers had to depend on the management. But now they are free citizens. They have they can decide whether they can come for work or not. So I believe in going forward, in sustaining them, in improving their livelihood, giving them a better life, in my opinion, in our opinion, change the model to a more flexi-time, performance-based wage model, because they don't have to come at 8:30 and hang around till 4:30. Allow them to come early, pluck their due poundage, get whatever they want, and then leave.
Mr. Arosami, I think you touched upon this issue, but I'm going to ask you for more of an answer. Members of your community, like others in Sri Lanka, increasingly aspire for vocations and employment in industries not related to agriculture. Working in the tea field is not the preferred choice. But Ceylon tea is the key export crop of Sri Lanka. How do we change this perception towards agricultural work? How do we bring dignity to this vocation?
Thank you for that question. Actually, as I told you, this, especially the youngsters in the community, coming to the tea plantation as a worker, they think that is the least dignified job in their career. So that, you know, it is the perception created among their elder generation that, you know, the mistreatments or the hardships they have faced during the course of years. So now, even now, most of here, like even though we are agricultural people, we are not ready to take a bucket and go and work in mud or dirt. So we always look into invest on smart agriculture and also introduce innovative technologies into the agriculture business. So similarly, the younger generation also aspire to be a part in the tea industry. As I told you, nearly there is a 1 million population residing in the estates with the tea plantation business, but they don't engage in that business. So what is the basic core understanding is this, the attraction part. So one is an attractable revenue system, a model system, and also an attractable working style. So if these two are provided to them, it is not an issue at all, because, you know, those who migrate to, see, other districts, or now when they come and join in these corporates in Colombo, their salaries are much lesser and they have to work in a hazardous environment. But despite the fact that, knowing that, they are coming here for a dignified job. So for this dignified job, we need to prepare a model where we all can work together and introduce a system. So now, when you take the tea plantation worker, they all like, you know, they show, like, it is normally showcased in the public forums, like they are traveling in barefoot and, you know, leech, and also the poor working environment. So once this is portrayed to the younger generation, obviously no one will go for work. So that is the reason we are, like, you know, even PhDT, and also we have been, you know, advocating for the unions also. You know, we have to adapt the system of new technologies and new improvements. So my intention and my wish is to keep this sustainability of this industry by incorporating new younger generation people to the stream, not only in the management level, but also in the worker level. So they should have an ownership on this industry. If there is that ownership is not created, then it is still it will be a challenge.
Let me now shift to Dr. Camphor. I think you already touched upon this issue. In the press, we read articles written about the working conditions and the livelihoods of workers in tea gardens in Sri Lanka, India, and Africa. Serious issues have been highlighted that require urgent attention of stakeholders to resolve. But we also find articles that draw conclusions based on a few exceptional cases and then go on to cast the entire industry in a negative light. Naturally, this type of reportage is disheartening to the estates, which are actively working to improve the livelihoods of their workers in often challenging economic and political conditions. How can your organization help to provide a more balanced perspective on the ground realities in tea plantations?
Thank you. Well, I obviously can't necessarily avoid that somebody doesn't come up with an article or makes a quick judgment, and we can't entirely exclude that that's not going to happen in the future. First of all, as I said before, in the work that we're doing practically here in our mother and child-friendly tea plantation initiatives, we do help plantations to implement what we would call sustainable solutions, solutions that are very honest, that are really going to the core of the issues, and then we talk about it. If you go on our website, for example, we have a couple of really nice videos of some of the first successes that we have seen with our partners in this plantation, and I do think that can counter that, that narrative. At the same time, just quickly to add, I think the best strategies I've seen from companies or factories to prevent this kind of accusation is to be more proactive, to write maybe a bit less glossy sustainability reports, but write very transparent sustainability reports. Because if you say in your sustainability reports, this is what we achieved and we're still struggling with this issue and that's what we're dealing on, the journalist has a much harder time to say, oh, look, he's still struggling with that. He said, yeah, that's what we said. That's why we're working on it. So I think one good strategy is really kind of attacking in this case with transparency, with issues. And then obviously we from the center are always here to support plantations wherever we can with real solutions that they then can also show and can showcase to the world on what they've been doing.
Thank you. Okay, let me now shift to Mr. Jagat Pathirana. I'm going to address the question in English for the benefit of our audience. The tea smallholders are the backbone of the Ceylon tea industry. Most of them own less than 1 hectare. The tea bushes are mainly vegetatively propagated, VPs, with an estimated economic life of 30 years. As the bushes age, replanting is a necessity. At the same time, the income earned from green leaf is steady and essential to their livelihood. Are the smallholders replanting at a rate sufficient to meet the needs of the industry? How does your organization help to achieve this objective?
උඩාතේවතු හිමියන්ගේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ තේ කර්මාන්තයේ කොදුනාරටියයි. ඔවුන්ගෙන් බොහෝ දෙනෙකුට හෙක්ටාරයකට වඩා අඩු ප්‍රමාණයක් හිමි. තේ පඳුරු ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් ශාකමය වශයෙන් ප්‍රචාරණය වන අතර ඇස්තමේන්තුගත ආර්ථික ආයු කාලය වසර 30කි. පඳුරු වයසට යත්ම නැවත වගා කිරීම අවශ්‍ය වේ. ඒ අතරම තේ දළු වලින් ලැබෙන ආදායම ඔවුන්ගේ ජීවනෝපාය සඳහා ස්ථාවර සහ අත්‍යවශ්‍ය වේ. දැනට වගා කර ඇති ඉඩම් කුඩා තේවතු හිමියන්ගේ අවශ්‍යතාවය සපුරාලීමට ප්‍රමාණවත්ද? මෙම අරමුණ සාක්ෂාත් කර ගැනීම සඳහා ඔබේ සංවිධානය උපකාර කරන්නේ කෙසේද? ඒ සඳහා ගෙන ඇති පියවර මොනවාද?
බොහොම ස්තුතියි. මං හිතන්නේ මෙතෙන්දී අපිට ප්‍රශ්න දෙකක් තුනක් තියෙනවා. පළවෙනි ප්‍රශ්නේ ගත්තයින් පස්සේ කුඩා තේවතු හිමියන්ගේ ප්‍රමාණය මම හිතන්නේ මීට වඩා වැඩි වේ යුතුයි කියන තැන අපි ඉන්නවා ස්ථාවරව. ඊළඟ කාරණෙත් එක්ක බැලුවෙන් පස්සේ තේ නැවත වගාව සහ අලුත් වගාව පාළු සිටවීම අනිවාර්යෙන් කළ යුතු කාරණයක්. එහෙම නැත්නම් තේ ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨය මම හිතන්නේ ඉදිරියට අසීරු තත්ත්වයකටපත් වෙනවා. ඒක තමයි අපි කුඩා තේවතු හිමියන් හැටියට දකින්නේ. මොකද එන්න තේ ඉඩම අවුරුදු 30ක් විතර ඒ දළු කඩනකොට ඒකේ අස්වැන්න ප්‍රමාණය අඩු වෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ එන ගැටලුව තමයි කුඩා තේවතු හිමියට අර එකවර එයාට ගලවලා තේ පඳුරු ගලවලා එකවර එයාට වගා කරගන්න ආර්ථික ශක්තියක් නැහැ. එතකොට එතෙන්දී අපි දකින එකම දේ තමයි ඔවුන්ට කොටසින් කොටස ගලවලා වගා කිරීම තමයි අපේ යෝජනාව. ඒ වෙනුවට මම හිතන්නේ කුඩා තේ සංවර්ධන අධිකාරිය පෞගේ වකවානුව තුල ඒකට ආධාර මුදල් ලබා දුන්නා. නමුත් දැන් මේ වෙනකොට ඒක අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා කුඩා තේවතු හිමියන්ට මම හිතන්නේ ආධාරයක් ලබා දෙනවා නම් ඒක තමයි ප්‍රමාණවත් වෙන්නේ.
Let me reply in English, and maybe Niranjan can help me. So, we depend a great deal on the government to support these replanting initiatives. But the reality is that the government spends 20% of its GDP, while its income is 12%, a deficit of 8%, year after year after year. And it even went down to 12%. What can we as an industry do to lift ourselves up, especially the matter of replanting? Can you translate my answer into English, into Sinhalese, please? Okay, let me try in Sinhalese. Then ලංකාවේ ආදායම ආණ්ඩුවට ආදායම 12යි. නමුත් ආණ්ඩුවේ වියදම 20ක්. ඒ කියන්නේ වෙනස 8යි. අපේ ආණ්ඩුව සුළුෙන් කියන්න පුළුවන් නම් බංකොලොත්. කොහොමද බංකොලොත් ආණ්ඩුවක් අපිට ආධාර කරන්නේ? අපි අපේ ඉන්ඩස්ට්‍රි එක අවුරුදු 150ක් කුඩා හිමි වතුකාරයෝ මෙච්චර ලොකු ප්‍රතිශතයක් නම් අපිට කරන්න බැරිද මේ අපේ ශ්‍රමයෙන් ඉස්සරහට එන්න බැරිද?
මම හිතන්නේ අදහස ඇත්තටම හොඳයි. නමුත් මෙතෙන්දී කරගන්න අපහසු තැනක් තියෙනවා. මම හිතන්නේ කුඩා තේවතු හිමියා සහ මහවතු හිමියා මේ ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨයට ඉන්න සියලුම දෙනා මම හිතන්නේ දන්න කාරණයක් තමයි අපි තමයි ඩොලර් සපයන එකම කණ්ඩායම. ඒතකොට මම හිතන්නේ මේක හැම කෙනෙක්ම අපි හිතන්න ඕනි අවධානය යොමු කළ යුතු කාරණාවක් තමයි කිසි කෙනෙකුට බරක් නැති කණ්ඩායමක් කුඩා තේවතු හිමියෝ ලක්ෂ 5ක් ඉන්නා වගේම මේගොල්ලන්ගෙන් යැපෙන්න කණ්ඩායමක් ඉන්නවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ ලක්ෂ 20ක් වගේ ප්‍රමාණයක් ඉන්නවා. එතකොට මේ කණ්ඩායම ඇත්තටම රජයට කවදාවත් කිසිම බරක් නැති කණ්ඩායමක්. ඒගොල්ලොම වගා කරලා ඒගොල්ලොම මුදල් හොයලා ඒගොල්ලොම කිසිම බරක් නැතුව ජීවත් වෙන කණ්ඩායමක්. ඉතින් මම හිතන්නේ අපිට මෙතෙන්දී අපි කොහොමද මෙතෙන්ට අවතීර්ණ වෙන්නේ? පළවෙනි මම හිතන්නේ අත්වැල වගේ දෙයක්වත් එයාලට ලබා දුන්නොත් තමයි මම දකින්නේ කුඩා තේවතු හිමියට. නැත්තම් ඔවුන්ට උන්ගේ ජීවනාලිය කරගන්න බෑ. මම අර කලින් කිව්වා සමානව එක කාරණයක් තමයි ඔවුන් එකපාර තේ අක්කරයක් තුනොත් එකපාර තේ අක්කරේ ගලවන්න බෑ. උන්ගේ ආදායම් සම්පූර්ණ අහිමි වෙනවා. එතකොට අපි කප්පාදුව පැත්තෙන් ගත්තොත් කප්පාදුවත් ඔවුන් කරන්නේ කොටසින් කොටස. එතකොට කොටසින් කොටස කරනවා කියන්නේ එයාගේ ආදායම අහිමි වෙන හින්දා තමයි එයාලා මේ විදිහට කරන්නේ. ඉතින් මෙතෙන්දී එකවර උන්ට කරන්න බෑ. යම් ප්‍රමාණික කොහෙන් හරි අපිට ඒ වගේ යම් මුදලක් අපිට ආධාර මුදලක් එහෙම නැත්නම් විජේත මොන හරි ආධාරයක් තියෙනවා නම් මේක තමයි මම හිතන්නේ එකම කණ්ඩායම මේක ඇත්තටම අපි හිතන්න ඕනේ මේක ඇත්තටම මම හිතන්නේ හැම කෙනෙක්ම සුළුවට තකන්න හොඳ නැති කණ්ඩායමක් කියන එක තමයි අපි හිතන්නේ.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to translate this so that the audience will, in a very short manner?
Actually,
Chairman of the Tea Board is now speaking.
this was a matter that was just discussed just 3 days ago when we met up with the financial advisor to the President, Dr. Samaratunga, on the topic of declining tea industry. In response to that invitation, the Director General of the Tea Board, who's there next to you, did a quick calculation because I had to go with some numbers. And what we told Dr. Samaratunga, for which he responded very positively, that's the good news. We require ballpark almost 500 billion Sri Lankan rupees over a period of 6 years. That is 100 billion a year. Worked out like this: 50,000 hectares a year, covering 150,000 hectares, on the basis of 1.5 million to replant only, and taking the smallholders' expenditure, usual monthly expenditure of about 50,000, paying 2/3 of that over a period of 1 year will entail 100 billion rupees. And over the 3 years to do 150,000 hectares, which will cover most of the low growns. The reason being predominantly they are from the low growns. And if you notice, going back on statistics, highest record low grown production was 210 million kilos back in 2014. Since then, it has been a downhill. They took it up well, and they said that the government has not done a large-scale investment to this industry. Given the President's vision being modernize agriculture, they are going to look at it positively. Obviously, we've got to go overseas to get funding for this because even the promotion fund is not enough, even if you switch it. Right? One single පරිවර්තන කරන්න මේ මාතෘකාව සති දවස් 3කට කලින් ආචාර්ය සමරතුංග මැතිතුමාගේ ප්‍රධානත්වයෙන් රැස්වීමක් තිබ්බ ජනාධිපති කාර්යාලයේ හොඳලට මේ ඩොක්ටර් අනුරුද්ධ අපිට ගණන් කියුම් කරලා දුන්නා. මොකද අපි දැන් වයිට් පේපර් එකක් ලෑස්ති කරනවා මේකට. අක්ක හෙක්ටයාර 50,000ක් වාර්ෂිකව නැවත වගා කරන්න වසර 3ක කාලයක් තුල ඒ කියන්නේ හෙක්ටයාර 1,50,000ක් කරනවා. මෙතෙන්දී අපේ ගණන් කියුම් හැටියට හෙක්ටයාරයක් නැවත වගා කරන්න පැලවලටයි ඒ කරන ඒ සැලසුම් කටයුතු වලට මිලියන 1.5යි. නමුත් කුඩාවතු හිමියාගේ අර මාසික වියදම 50,000ක් විතර තමයි අපි මේ අයවැය කරේ. එයින් තුනෙන් දෙකක් අපි ගෙවන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ 35,000ක් මාසිකව ගෙවන්නේ. ඒ අනුව ගත්තම වාර්ෂිකව බිලියන රුපියල් 100ක් බිලියන 100ක් රුපියල් බිලියන 100ක් අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා. වසර 3කදී හෙක්ටයාර 1,50,000ක් ඉවර කරන්න බිලියන 300ක් අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා. ඊළඟ අවුරුදු 3ේදී 60 බිලියන 60ක් බිලියන 40ක් බිලියන 20ක් මොකද ක්‍රමක්‍රමයෙන් වාණිජ්‍ය මට්ටමට එනවා ඒ තේ ගස් ටික. ඒ අනුව බිලියන 420ක් අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා ශ්‍රී ලංකාවට. හොඳම වචනේ තමයි ආචාර්ය සමරතුංග මැතිතුමා කිව්වේ තේ ශාස්ත්‍රයට දැන් සෑහෙන කාලෙක ඉඳන් රජයෙන් ලොකු ආයෝජනයක් කළා නැහැ. ඒක කරන්න කාලය ඇවිල්ලා තිනවා. මොකද ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ දර්ශනය තමයි මේ නවීකරණ කෘෂිකර්ම එහෙම නැත්නම් මොඩර්නයිස් ඇග්‍රිකල්චර්. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා මම හිතන්නේ අපිට පොඩි මේකක් තියෙනවා. මේක අපි දිගටම ක්‍රියාත්මක කරොත් අපිට පුළුවන් වෙයි මේක because the bushers are on an average 40 to 45 years old in the low grown sector. Gaul being the oldest, reaching 50. Ratnapura, the next oldest, reaching 35. Gone beyond the optimum period by 5 to 10 years minimum. Thank you.
Thank you for that good news. Let's hope the government holds to its commitment. Okay, next question to you, Dr. Rajudure. What strategies does your organization use to recruit and attract younger workers to your estate?
Well, that's a very tough question because, as Bharat said, there's a perception.
That's my job.
That's a perception around, not only in Sri Lanka, all over the world, that agriculture is not an attractive job. I mean, it's a phenomena that you can observe all over the world. So I believe that making the work dignified, offering a better lifestyle, working from home with their kith and kin around, with familiar surroundings, is an option that we have to promote, because people would not like to come to Colombo, stay in a boarding or Chamari and work. If they can work within the confines of their community, that will be fantastic. So we have proposed, one is the wage model must change. Second is, instead of this line room concept that we are fast departing from, establish villages so that they are termed and named as villages, recognized as such. People come for work from the village. You're not coming from the lines, you come from a village like any other person, finish work, go back. That absolves us a lot of responsibilities, and they'll be more self-reliant and independent. So we need to change our outlook and the way we look at the youngsters coming in. And there is, for example, our company, we have introduced a system where we take educated youth and giving them higher responsibilities in field, but that's a small percentage. We can't take everybody into the management card, as you understand. But small steps, I think if we move along this path, sooner or later we'll come to a fair equilibrium in terms of attracting.
Okay, let me just go further on that question. At yesterday's session, the Chief Procurement Officer of Lipton Tea and Infusions spoke about a tea academy in Kenya. Do we have an equivalent in Sri Lanka where tea workers will go through a formal program and then become qualified workers, better educated and more empowered?
Yes, of course. I think this is not something new. I recall about 10 or 12 years back with the ADB funding, we took batches of workers, Kanganis, and trained them at Bogwantala at the NIPM outlet. Then, of course, funds dried up. But individual companies in the private sector are doing their training. Tea smallholders, the tea board, there's enough of training. Unfortunately, this is not captured and highlighted as such. A lot of, even the PhD for that matter, not related to tea, but related to the other socio-economic aspects of their livelihood and life, is a lot of things are being done. We have the NIPM, and we have the, what do you call, the other institutes that support training and development and creating awareness for people who are coming to the tea industry new. At that level, then of course, obviously staff and management, there's a different system.
Okay, let me turn my attention to Dr. Anuruddha. We understand the role of the Sri Lankan Tea Board as a regulator in tea quality, the use of agrochemicals, and overseeing the reasonable price formula. What is the role of the Sri Lanka Tea Board when it comes to worker livelihood?
Yes, good afternoon, you all. Right. Now, yes, exactly. Tea Board is regulator in Sri Lanka tea industry, and when we take the whole role of tea board, we are responsible to get the tea that from the bush to cup, say the quality, the fineness, and the sustainability and ethical tea, like all these good things to the tea cup. That is our primary role. That is what we call the regulator. Then when we come to the tea industry in Sri Lanka, actually we have a strong stakeholder base in Sri Lanka. They are well regulated, they are well connected, and that they are strong in one side. Then when we take all these stakeholders, we are having, as a regulator, we are having role to maintain, say, fairness, the fairness among these parties, and the good connectivity among these parties, and the sustainability of these relationships. That is also a role of the tea board as a regulator. And beyond this thing, as a, say, the regulatory transformation, you see now here also we discuss. Now we are discussing the Gen Z consumer and then Gen Z worker. Now beyond Gen Z consumer and worker, we should expect the Gen Z entrepreneur. He is also coming. Therefore, the way we do the business will not be the way they do the business. Maybe your sons and the grandsons, the whole structure will be changed. Therefore, we should prepare the industry to face for this generation shift. That is also role of T-board as regulator. And with all these things, we say we are sort of say golden bond in the tea industry in Sri Lanka.
Thank you. This is a question from the audience, and it's also on my list. I'm going to ask this from both sectors, both the RPCs as well as from the smallholders. Yesterday, one of the speakers basically said, mechanize or die. Increasing productivity will require mechanization. I remember visiting your estate, Pedro, this year around February, and one of your planters was explaining to me that the issues related to mechanization, the stress on the bush and so on and so forth. Can you tell us, how do we mechanize, given all these constraints?
Yes, I believe that mechanization should be situational, because Sri Lanka tea is still marketed as hand-picked, artisanal, more accent on quality, and that definitely requires selectivity. So I'm not downplaying mechanization. There are locations, seasons that you need to add mechanical implements in order to harvest the crop. Sometimes it's better to harvest the crop at a certain stage of growth than to not harvest and allow it to be mature and be of no use. So it's very site-specific, very season-specific, very situational. And as an agriculturalist, if we have the sufficiently trained workforce, I believe it is beneficial in terms of the overall goodness of the tea, physical and other physiological benefits to the tea bush, to pick by hand and to be selective. But given the situation where there is no choice, it's better to harvest in some form than to abandon it or not harvest at all.
පතිරණ මහත්මයා දැනට තේ වතු නෙලන්නේ අතෙන්. නමුත් ඊයේත් අපේ කතාවේ එක මහත්මයෙක් කිව්වා අපි මෙකනයිස් කරේ නෑ නම් මේ ඉන්ඩස්ට්‍රි එක ඉවර වෙනවා. දැනට ඒ පැත්තට යනවද? අතෙන් නෙලන්නේ නැතුව මැෂින් හෝ යන්ත්‍ර පාවිච්චි කරලා ඩ්‍රෝන් එකක් මට දන්නේ නැහැ මොනවද තියෙන අලුත් යන්ත්‍ර. නමුත් ඒ වගේම යන්ත්‍ර පාවිච්චි කරලා තේ නෙලනවද?
ඇත්තටම කියනවා නම් යන්ත්‍ර භාවිතා කරනවා. එතන අපිට තියෙන ගැටලුව තමයි යන්ත්‍ර ලැබෙනවා. ඒ යන්ත්‍ර භාවිතා කරනවා. නමුත් අපේ ඒ හදා දීපු යන්ත්‍ර අපේ පොළවට නොගැලපෙන ඒවා තමයි බොහෝ වෙලාවට තියෙන්නේ. එකක් දැන් සම්පූර්ණ බැලුවොත් එහෙම අපේ ඉඩම් පිහිටීම තියෙන්නේ හුඟක් කඳු පල්ලම් අතරේ. එතකොට අර ඒ තියෙන යන්ත්‍රය අපිට භාවිතා කරන්න අපහසු තැන් තියෙනවා. ඒක තමයි අර කුඩා තේවතු හිමියා නිතරම අතින් දළු නෙලන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ. නමුත් මම හිතන්නේ ඒ විදිහ යන්ත්‍රයක් මොකක් හරි නිර්මාණය කරලා තියෙනවා නම්, ඒ විදිහ යන්ත්‍රයක් එනවා නම් අපිට මම හිතන්නේ ඒක ඊටාම සුසු වැඩක්. මොකද මම හිතන්නේ ඉස්සරහට අපි හැම කෙනෙක්ම දන්නවා මේ කම්කරු ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා කියන එක අපි හැම කෙනෙක්ම දන්නවා. නමුත් අපිට යන්න පුළුවන් අර වගේ යන්ත්‍රයක් අපිට හඳුන්වලා දීලා ඒ වගේ දෙයක් කරොත් මම හිතන්නේ යන්ත්‍රවලට ඉදිරි අනාගතයේ යා යුතුයම කියන එක තමයි අපේ ස්ථාවරේ තියෙන්නේ.
I won't go further into mechanization because that is the next session. But in principle, I think what he said is the terrain is so uneven that it's not easy to use machines. Okay, I'm going to ask Ganesh a question.
Thank you.
A question which only he can answer. Mr. Sridharan, sharing the experiences of India, showed that the gardens produced quality teas, received higher prices, which then compensated the value chain sufficiently. Several of the speakers spoke about producing quality over quantity. At the same time, yesterday, we heard that retailers are battling on price and the inevitable race to the bottom. Mr. Nadeem Ahmad told us that brands are falling over each other, offering unsustainable discounts. Therefore, they will naturally seek cheaper, and hence poorer quality teas. Consumers will then continue to receive poorer and poorer quality tea. We are locked in a doom loop. If we are to provide a better future for our workers, as Mr. Sridharan explained, how do we break out of this doom loop?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, I did listen to most of it. So this entire 2 days, I would say, doesn't matter. This entire 2 days, I think the discussion, not only what Sridharan said, Dr. Petyagoda this morning, the investment that is required, T-Board chairman just now mentioned, the investment that is required to make the industries continue, it requires money. And where can that money come from? Only from retailer point where consumer is paying money for the money for tea. It's just that there's so many paradoxical things. Numbers don't add up. I was just sharing. Has been spoken in the last 2 days. I mean, it might sound like a summary of the last 2 days, but your question kind of hit the nail on that. The paradox is that on one side, we are saying there is too much production. We saw, the African gentleman saying there is, or even Nadeem saying $500 million worth of excess tea that is sitting in one place. We have reduced production by almost 100 million kilos. Yet, climate change is going to reduce the situation further. Workers are not interested in working. Still, all these things don't add up because prices are driven down, but still we are making tea, still we are plucking tea, still, there is excess production. So there is something majorly wrong, and, our creative content person, Ishara, when she wrote the curtain raiser video, there was a sentence that she said, there's something wrong with the math that this entire industry is working on. And we all have to get together to solve that math properly. Because there's several interests working, some incongruent, some, against each other. Again, it just shows that I didn't listen to your question, right? So I just want to just add one thing. Why, as an exporter, I should be even sitting on this panel? You're an exporter who's doing this panel because of your, great ability to put people on the spot. But as an exporter, I'm here because we face the brunt of the livelihood issue, right? So the moment there is a headline, at that moment in time, messages fly asking, what's going on. The headlines reach the boardrooms much faster than whatever we can communicate. And as Ines said, we can't avoid the headlines, but if we are going to take away one point out of, for me, is that Ines is what she said on the podium as well as in a comment. I just don't want it to be washed away. If we are upfront and open and honest about where we are, accept the situation and recognize all the work that we are doing in that order, right? Not trying to say that, because it's nature, human nature, that we are very defensive. The moment somebody points a finger at you, I want to put all my defense and say, look, we've done all of this, government didn't do this. In the narrative that Dr. Rajadure says, which I'm 100% with him, this womb to tomb narrative. Why should a private sector company even do that? And him saying that he is doing it is wrong. In fact, you should say, I don't want to do it. Why are you even touching that subject? It's government's job to look after people. These people, I'm told, that I'm yet to see the evidence, the 51 hospitals, and I was part of PHTT, so I know 51 hospitals that were supposed to be taken over, which the estate management was doing, because that was the business model at that time, the legacy business model that was given to these companies. The 51 hospitals should have been taken over by the government, because healthcare is government's job. We are all paying taxes for that. But this, as of date, probably 6 or 7 have been taken over. Many hospitals have been abandoned. So what the companies have to do, at least they have to do something to put a plaster and get those healthcare going. So this legacy which has been thrust upon us, we have no choice but to evolve. And the governments have failed. Inaction at most important points have caused this situation. So we have to recognize the problem. We have to, when a quality claim comes to us, from a customer, we've been trained to first say, yes, there is something wrong, before we go and find fault or find the root cause of it. We've got to accept what is wrong. And the same thing holds good for this. We all have to accept that there is a problem. And this problem, yes, it's been a legacy problem that's come to us, but we are going to make amends. We've done all of this, we're going to make amends. So this entire session, I would like it to be a point to take out of that. And the quality, getting the price, if the investment is not coming, absolutely this industry cannot survive. So we all have to communicate more to the consumer, to the retailer, get that price in, and make sure that that gets in. Time's up.
Yeah, so let me just take another 5 minutes of your time. I know your stomachs are rumbling and you really want to leave, but just one other point. Dr. Afshar yesterday talked about a living wage. A report from the Global Living Wage Coalition based in June 2023, data put it for the estate sector at 47,464 rupees gross and 76,266 for a family of 4 in the plantation sector. My comment is now based on the situation in Sri Lanka. The tea industry doesn't exist as a vacuum. By the way, this question is to Mr. Rajudure, Dr. Rajudure. With the keen competition for workers in Sri Lanka and the relative mobility of labor, meaning people in Sri Lanka can move from part to part. Of course, they are constrained by their home domestic situation, but generally labor is mobile. Can estates retain labor by paying wages below the living wage in Sri Lanka? I am just putting this point out that labor is a scarce commodity in Sri Lanka. Unemployment is 4.5%. If, of course, the labor participation level is low, but still for all, if you speak to most people who are in industry in Sri Lanka, they will tell you that we don't have enough labor. Therefore, it's a factor of production which is in demand. If you don't pay the price, people are not going to hang around. And they, of course, always have the option of getting on a plane and finding employment elsewhere to some extent. So, in that context, in a contested labor market, what is the meaning of a living wage? Or may I put it to Dr. Afshar, I believe in Sri Lanka, people are paid a living wage, and perhaps that English breakfast blend should be 100% Ceylon tea.
Right. Very briefly, I don't want to hold up the proceedings. I don't want to go into the living wage discussion because, as I mentioned earlier, I believe 2 or 3 years back when they worked it out, we wrote to them officially about the computation, incorrect and overinflated. That's a subject for another day. But look at the agriculture sector of Sri Lanka. We have 2.2 million people in the sector, of which 90% is informal, what you call. So there's no guarantee of employment, no guarantee of benefit of statutory and other traditional benefits that the corporate sector gives. So there is a comparison and comparative work life, because in the plantations, I didn't explain, housing, health, sanitation, guarantee, assurance. Even during the COVID time, we are proud that not even one worker was retrenched. In fact, our plantation sector, we gave foodstuff to their doorstep, immunized them 3 times, just to give an example of the total custodial care that the plantations corporate sector, as much as a smallholder sector in their own way, did to protect the workers. So this living wage should be relative to Sri Lankan situation. Now, recently I read about a day back, the Attorney General has passed the statute to say that minimum wage, not the living wage, should be 17,000 rupees per month and 700 rupees per day. So you have to take these two ends and see what is the reality. Someone can compute the living wage, but what is the anchor point? What is a baseline? With what are you comparing this? We should be consulted, the other stakeholders should be consulted in formulating this, because nothing should be said about us without us. That's it.
I think that ends the session.
Thank you.